Good afternoon. Welcome to the Heritage Foundation and our Van Andel Center. We, of course, welcome those who join us on all of these occasions on our heritage.org website. I would ask everyone here in-house if you'll make sure your cell phones have been turned off. It's always appreciated. We will, of course, post the program on our Heritage homepage for your future reference as well. And our internet viewers are always welcome to send questions or comments simply emailing us at speaker@heritage.org at any time. Hosting and introducing our special guest is Dr. Kim Holmes. Dr. Holmes is Distinguished Fellow in our Catherine and Shelby Cullom Davis Institute for International Studies. He previously served here at Heritage as Vice President for Foreign and Defense Policy. He was a founding editor of the annual Index of Economic Freedom, which has now become Heritage's signature publication, in fact, celebrating its 20th anniversary. From 2002 to 2005, it was his privilege to serve the George W. Bush administration as Assistant Secretary for International Organization Affairs, widely recognized as one of America's leading conservative voices in national security policy. He has also written the recent book, Rebound, Getting America Back to Great, that looks at both domestic and foreign policy ideas as well as cultural issues. Please join me in welcoming Kim Holmes. Kim?
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Heritage Foundation. It's a real pleasure for me to host a very old friend of the Heritage Foundation here today. For as long as I have been at Heritage, there was always Ed Rowny. I first met him in the Reagan administration years when he was the President's chief negotiator for the strategic nuclear arms talks, the START talks. And ever since then, he has been a strong presence in our lives here at Heritage, advising us and sharing his vast knowledge and experience with succeeding generations of young conservatives. Ed is here today to talk about his new book, Smokey Joe and the General. And it's, of course, a biography of his mentor, General John Elliott Wood, who was a renowned and masterful trainer in the United States Army. But as also, for those of you who already read the book, it's also a book about Ed Rowny himself. And I'm very glad, and the rest of us are very glad for that, because what a life Ed Rowny has lived. He attended the 1936 Olympics in Berlin, and he watched as Adolf Hitler turned his back on the American track star Jesse Owens. He commanded the Buffalo Soldiers of the 92nd Division in Italy during World War II. He became an aide and a spokesman for General Douglas MacArthur, and he helped evacuate U.S. troops and also Koreans in the Korean War. He helped introduce the helicopter as a platform for the United States Army to fight insurgencies in Vietnam. And of course, he had a long, distinguished career as a U.S. arms control negotiator, starting as the U.S. representative to the SALT talks under Presidents Nixon, Ford, and Carter. He came to the notice of a future U.S. President, Ronald Reagan, when he resigned from the U.S. Army in 1979, retired from the Army, I should say, in 1979 in protest over the SALT II treaty. And President Reagan made him his chief strategic arms negotiator in his first term and appointed him as a special advisor on arms control in his second term. Now, few people have lived a fuller life, and few have participated in and influenced so many different aspects of our history over the last 70 years. We are very proud to host you here today, Ed. We're looking forward to hearing certainly about your book and General Wood, but also looking forward to hear about your long and distinguished life. We're very proud to have you here, and so let's all give General Rowny a warm welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I thank my many friends for coming here to listen to me again. Heritage is sort of second home to me, and Kim Holmes, of course, is a legend and a master of foreign policy who should have more people listening to him, particularly in today's administration. But anyway, just to repeat some of the points that Kim made. This book is a combination of biography of John Elliott Wood, my first boss in the Army, who was the best trainer in the Army, a very innovative guy, unusual in many respects, and of course my own autobiography. It spans about 50 years, 39 years in the military, from second lieutenant to lieutenant general, and then, as Kim said, I retired from the Army in protest after President Carter signed the SALT II treaty, which I thought was both unverifiable and unequal. Then I spent another 11 years working for 2 terms for President Reagan. My first term as his chief negotiator of START. We no longer wanted to limit arms, we wanted to reduce arms, STA, doctrine talks. And then my second term, I was his special advisor and also a roaming advisor around the roaming ambassador. Spent 5 trips around the world to talk to head officials of Japan, Korea, China, Australia, and the Pope. And I made 4 additional trips behind the Iron Curtain to talk to distances like the Polish Lake Walesa, Czech Václav Havel, and Hungarian Josef Antal. So I want to talk to you about these things. I'll repeat a few of the highlights. When I joined the Army, I was assigned to the 41st Singing Engineers. This is a black outfit with white officers. Very proud outfit whose soldiers had served in the old Buffalo outfits, 10th and 9th and 10th Cavalry in the Midwest here during the last part of the last century before this. And Joe Wood, known Smokey Joe because of the fast curved balls he threw were reminiscent of the famous Smokey Joe book of the Red Sox, famous picture of the Red Sox. And very innovative, very unusual, eccentric, some people have said crazy, but he was crazy like a fox. Everything he did had a purpose. When I joined, he did what he did with all second lieutenants. He put me through an initiation. And what he did, he'd give you an impossible job to do to see how you would handle failure. Well, to my great luck, I happened to pass that initiation by this great stroke of good luck. And he took me under his wing. And from then on, he micromanaged my career all through World War II and the next 20 years of his life after it, much to my advantage, because he would hand me jobs way above my head, and I'd fail, and he said, well, we learned something from that, didn't we? And when I succeeded, which was not as often, he'd say, I've got to promote you for this. So I was promoted way ahead of my contemporaries. Embarrassing to get from second lieutenant to lieutenant colonel in 3 years when a lot of my classmates were still captains and majors. But anyway, the embarrassment I took with a grain of salt, so I enjoyed that. But so World War II, I served under Wood, who was the cadre, the black outfit, the 92nd Infantry Division. Again, another black outfit with white officers. And I served in 7 campaigns with him. Real tough fighting, real tough slugging. Division didn't do very well. But in February of 1945, They had one big last attack against the Gothic line, and my job was to take an infantry regiment. By that time, I'd been shifted from the engineers to the infantry because we had a boss who said there are no good battalions or good or bad battalions, only good or bad battalion commanders. And that philosophy caused us to lose 7 infantry battalion commanders in 1 week. So I was shifted over to engineers. And my part of that last attack was to take a task force of about 1,200 people behind enemy lines. My task was a success, but at a great price. I came back with a little over 100 out of 1,220 people that I started with. So it was quite a disaster. The division did not succeed. It broke it up and remade it to a new division, and we went from the worst division in Europe to one of the best divisions in Europe. Well, Smokey Joe Wood retired, and as was characteristic of him, went under the GI Bill of Rights back to school. He'd had a degree from MIT first. Now he won a master's degree in town planning, and he kept watch over me for the next 20 years or so. After World War II, I was picked up by a second mentor of mine, Colonel, at that time, General Abe Lincoln, that some of you may know was the famous political scientist teacher at West Point. And Lincoln had a brigade of people that he thought he should steep in foreign policy and international relations. And we would meet after school hours with him. And again, he became the Army's chief planner and had me pulled into the Pentagon, where I served the first 2 years after World War II. At times directly under General Eisenhower, who was reconstructing the Army and taking power of the whole reconstruction of the armed forces, and also worked for a famous general I worked for again, Lars Norstad, a brilliant 3-star Air Force general who became the head of SACEUR, Supreme Commander of Europe. Lincoln decided that I should go to graduate school. The Army had different ideas. They said that we don't need anybody in international relations, but we'll send you to the engineering school. We need engineers. So I went to school, Yale, for a master's degree in engineering, and in the same 2 years got the master's degree in international relations. At the end of that time, both Wood and Lincoln conspired to send me to the Far East Command. They said, well, you worked for General Marshall directly, you worked for General Eisenhower directly, now you've got to work for another top general, MacArthur, because they're all different. And believe you me, they were all different. Anyway, I happened to be on the desk on June 25th, 1950. One of the messages, I was a duty officer on a Sunday when the message came across, and there started the Korean War. The next day, I was called in by General MacArthur and said, here's an order I want you to read. And it said, to Lieutenant Colonel Edward L. Rowny, effective immediately, in addition to your other duties, you are the Far East official spokesman. Paragraph 2. Tell the press everything they need to know, nothing they need not know. Signed, MacArthur. One of the best, shortest, best orders I ever got. Well, as you know, we were greatly outnumbered 5-1, both in equipment and soldiers in North Korea pushed down at the Busan perimeter, and I was one of the 3 planners of the Inchon invasion. This Inchon invasion was famous for several reasons. One, that it helped turn the tide around in Korea. And one thing that's very little known is that it saved the Marine Corps from extinction. And I have that in the book because I'm surprised that people don't know that, and it's not very well publicized. Maybe for very good reasons. Maybe the Marines just as soon keep it quiet. But President Truman said, we don't need the Marines anymore. And in the spring of '50, he signed a letter saying, Secretary of Defense, begin to disorganize, dismember the Marine Corps. Well, my boss, General Allman from World War II, happened to be a chief of staff of MacArthur, and well, I'd say my high boss over the G3 that I worked for. And he had a classmate, Lieutenant General Shepard, from VMI. And we needed a 3rd division, another division, to make the Inchon invasion. So Allman said to Shepard, look, you go out and pull together 15,000 reservists, Marine who served in World War II, will put together a division. The Inchon will be a success, and the Marine Corps will be saved. And it was. It worked just that well. General MacArthur put together the 10th Corps for the Inchon invasion, and said that he wanted me to be the engineer. I said, I can't do that, General MacArthur. And he said, why not? I said, well, it has 5 engineer regiments, all commanded by colonels, and it calls for a brigadier general, and I'm only a lieutenant colonel. No problem, I said. You're now a brigadier general. So I was breveted a brigadier general and wore the stars, but didn't get the pay, unfortunately, for the time that I was a Corps engineer. I put the bridge across the Han River, not an easy job. Went up to the Yalu, got kicked back after we'd taken Seoul, and I helped put together the dropping of parts of an air bridge to rescue the Marines and soldiers who were trapped up there at the Chosin Reservoir. I came out, I was put in charge of the Hungnam evacuation, and the beautiful fireworks of blowing up that port of Hungnam, but also helped to rescue 100,000 Christian North Koreans who were under sure that they were going to be exterminated by the Chinese after the Chinese came in. And we brought those home back down to Busan in what we call the Busan perimeter. I served the next year. Again, they ran out of infantry regiment commanders in Korea, so they moved me back from the engineers over to the infantry, and I commanded the 38th Infantry and took a critical hill 1243 meters, which was on the flank of Heartbreak and Heartbreak Ridge there. After that, I experimented some with helicopters when I became an assistant division commander of the 82nd Airborne and became the director of the House Board tests. And as a result of that, took a group of 25 scientists and 25 Army officers to Vietnam in 1962 to experiment with helicopters in combat. I tell in about a chapter of the book a very unbelievable story, really, of how difficult it was to fight the services with in order to put that division, put the first Air Mobile Division together, because not only was the Air Force against Army helicopters, they said that anything that flew with weapons was their territory. The Navy was, of course, with them. And also had the Army against me, because at this point the Army Chief of Staff decided he wanted to be broad, show what a broad-minded guy he was. So I had Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines all against me, fighting for this air mobility concept. Well, I had a third mentor, and this was Scoop Jackson, who, when I met him, was a congressman. He came to Fort Benning when I was teaching there, and I was teaching what I call profit time, professional improvement time. I thought that Army School was behind in its tactics, and I wanted to stretch the minds a little of the people. So on a voluntary basis, we taught 3 nights a week at Fort Benning. And one of these sessions, a rather disheveled, overweight captain of the reserves got up, but he asked a brilliant question, and about some of the things I was talking about the possible use of nuclear weapons in the Army and the possible use of helicopters being armed. And he was so good that I brought him up on the stage, and he taught the class the rest of that evening. Later, I found out that he was a congressman, and 2 days later, I got summoned up to the Secretary of the Army, thinking that after Scoop Jackson had talked to him, that I might get a pat on the back, and I was silenced. I was told that I was outside the roles and missions of the Defense Department. I was disruptive. I would cease and desist all profit time, and I thought here my career was at an end. Well, now the two of the mentors I had, Abe Lincoln and Scoop Jackson, got together this time, and they put me into the arms control business. Scoop Jackson didn't like the military representative of the Joint Chiefs. And of course, I didn't want to go to strategic arms talks, because I had been first colonel, general, brigadier general, first major general, and then I got stuck for 6 years. I was on the shelf while I went from the first major general in the Army to the last in punishment for putting together the Air Mobile Division. But these two mentors got together and had me assigned to General Gunther at SHAPE, and there I was able to recover and from what I'd lost behind, and picked up somewhat, until I found that I could not support the SALT II Treaty, and I had to be careful to say I retired, because if I had the money, I would have resigned, but the kids needed to go to school, so I retired. I took my retired pay, but I retired in protest, and the rest is history. Well, on a day or two before Christmas of 1979, I got a call from somebody describing himself as a governor. And he said, you know, I've been listening to what you've been saying to the Senate about how bad the SALT II Treaty is. And it sounds like you're getting a lot of the stuff from Heritage, which I was. And he said, I'd like you to come talk to me. So I did in the spring, January of 1980. And for about 3 hours, he asked me questions about arms control. At one point, he said, look, he said, I don't quite understand this. He said, this policy we have of mutual assured destruction. He said, it's kind of mad, isn't it? Of course, the acronym was MAD. We have a pistol at their head, they have a pistol at our head. And I said, that's right. And he said, well, he said, kind of dumb, don't you think? He said, why don't we put on a helmet? And I said, because we don't have the scientists who can deliver a air defense system. Oh, he said, I have more faith in scientists than you have. I want you to meet Edward Teller. So I met Edward Teller, and we got good friends. And anyway, long story short, I went to work for Reagan. We hit it off, and he made me his chief negotiator. I might say that during those early days, it was a very rough time for the president. I would sit in the back of the room when he had his meetings with the cabinet, and the cabinet members said things like, Mr. President, you just can't pay all this money for defense, spend all this money for defense. We have double-digit inflation. We have double-digit unemployment. And he said, listen, he said, I'm the President of the United States. My first duty is the security of the United States. And he talked it all down, and we did start what was called peace through strength. I might say that you probably all know, those of you here, Heritage, that for the first 90 days, first 100 days really, we followed the Heritage game book. Heritage supplied Reagan a day-by-day outline of what to do, and he didn't need a staff. He had a good staff here at Heritage, and it worked like a charm, and went very well. During the second term of Reagan, he kicked me upstairs and made me a special advisor, and I did go to these countries around the world, talk to the Pope, and also got to meet the dissidents. And that was a very satisfying part of my career. I might say that I grew to not only respect but love that man, and I found it so hard to keep quiet when liberals, some of whom you know, I won't mention here, one of whom runs another foundation here in town, would criticize Reagan. But as you can see, that one of the themes of my book is that a person to be successful needs a mentor. I was fortunate to have 3 mentors: Smokey Joe Wood, and Abe Lincoln, and Scoop Jackson. No man's an island, or as I put in the book, difficulty with being a self-made man is that he's a product of unskilled labor. So you need help, and that's one of the things, as well as the other things that leadership is required, and leadership needs innovation, and it needs courage. I found out, and I demonstrate in the book, that moral courage, as Napoleon said, is the physical courage, as 3 to 1. And you have to really stick your neck out and take your chances. And sometimes brilliant people stick their necks out and they fail, like Gavin, and get fired. But I happened to be brought back to life after I was grounded by the Secretary of the Army. And so I thoroughly enjoyed that. Well, I want to mention one other thing, that this book of mine, has one unique feature. Colonel Wood and General Wood and I rate the three top officers I worked for, Marshall, Eisenhower, and MacArthur. And as I talk around the different places, you can imagine that this is very controversial because people down at VMI can't understand why I don't give Marshall a perfect grade. And of course, when I go down and talk to people at the MacArthur Museum down in Norfolk, they can't understand why I put the Marshall down below, MacArthur down below Marshall. And my friends from the Eisenhower Institute are really chagrined that I also rate Eisenhower down below Marshall. So anyway, you'll find a 9-point rating scale where I rate these three generals in this book, plus several other interesting anecdotes that you may be interested in. One is that the Pope that I met was very, very affable and very, very kind and ebullient, I would say, and had a good sense of humor. When I was going to meet him, I was going down the marble corridor in the Vatican, and the lights were on, and it was bright, and I didn't see that there wasn't a step there, and I was about to fall down when a tall cleric in a red cap caught me. And the Pope rushed up. He thought I'd fallen. He said, "Pretty good catch, don't you think, by a cardinal?" So I really didn't realize that the Pope followed our baseball that closely. Anyway, I could go on with anecdotes, but I won't. I'd like to leave most of my time now to take your questions, be interested in those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I could just take the privilege of holding the chair here to ask the first question. Ed, you ended up talking about grading some of our most esteemed military leaders of the last 70 years, and you talked about the importance of character and even courage and moral leadership. What do you make of our current leaders today? And I don't mean just the president, but I mean leaders of Congress, politicians, and even the military leaders today. And I'm not really asking the question from a political or ideological point of view. I mean, we have our differences with the president. They're quite well known. If you want to talk about that, be my guest. But what I'm mainly interested in is this point you're making about the character of leadership and the kind of leaders that we have today. Could you give us your views on that?
Yes, I'm disappointed, and yet I find it difficult to criticize them openly because times are changing. Talking to my children and even my grandchildren, things are going on that I never dreamed would happen in my day. So we have a more open press, a more virulent press, a press that often wants to embarrass people more than the president and others than they do want to help them, or they want to tell funny stories, fancy stories, rather than tell the facts. So but even so, with that, with exceptions, of course, there are some very fine exceptions, I'm disappointed that the loss of duty on our country in some of the top officers, Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marine Corps, and of course that goes hand in hand with a great loss of interest in foreign affairs. I think that we're going to, future historians are going to show that we went down the road of the fall of the Roman Empire because we got disinterested in what's going on around the rest of the world. And it used to be that we had half an hour, an hour and a half of foreign affairs on radio and TV every day. Now limited to about 1 hour a week on Sunday with CNN. But kind of a roundabout question. In short, that plus the loss of some of our great ethical values. I'm appalled at the number of generals who will take risks with travel and other expenses, and also those who use what I call the shouting technique. I thought that the shouting way to lead should stop at plebe year at West Point when you got to be a yearling, but too many generals lead by the shouting technique rather than by the being out in front. So unless there's some more detailed questions you want to get to, I just have to express my disappointment, and yet I'm not sure how you turn this around. I'm a member of a committee at West Point that's been working for the last 12 years to bring back its former high standards. We're having difficulty on the honor side. People just don't think that these are virtues anymore. They think you're a bunch of old-fashioned fuds, you know, who believe in that stuff. So these are hard to bring around. I do what little I can that way, but in general, I'm disappointed.
Thank you. Yes, sir. You identify yourself also.
John Constata, Redzima Photo. General, I wonder if, it's a two-part question. I wonder if you could tell us somewhat more about your experiences negotiating with the Soviets and how you figured them out, how you figured out what they were trying to do, and how you countered that. And the second part of the question is, would you say it was more difficult to negotiate with the Soviets than to negotiate within the armed forces for the things you wanted to do?
Yeah, very good question. I was fortunate at Yale in a way because when I got 2 master's degrees, I had to have 4 languages, 2 in each degree. And squeezing those all in a week, the only language I could squeeze in was Russian. So I studied Russian, and that got me interested in Russian language and history, and particularly negotiating. And these were the days before computers, and I got out a whole bunch of cards, and I read about 25 books and put together 25 experiences people had negotiating with the Soviets. And I developed what it called the 10 Commandments of negotiating. I found out that in general, the Soviets take negotiations seriously. They teach it. They have an academy that teaches it. We don't. When I was the chief negotiator for START, I was the only one who spoke Russian out of my 9 people on my side. On the 10 people on their side, which they always wanted one more than we had, they all spoke English. Negotiating with the Soviets was tough because we did not steep ourselves in the culture and the language the way the Russians steeped themselves in our culture and language. They knew our vulnerabilities. They knew where to hit us. They knew our political system and knew how to divide us, which they did. And that leads to the second part that, yes, you hit the nail on the head. It was often harder for me to get things done with the bureaucracy at home than it was negotiating with the Soviets. So I'll have to just pass you over to my 10 Commandments, which you'll find that I wrote in a New York Times op-ed piece back in 1972, I think. And you'll find a lot of it in my other book that I wrote, 1992, It Takes One to Tango, where I talk about working for 5 different presidents. In a word, tough to negotiate with the Soviets. Very secretive people, and they get away with it. Also, they did get away with it until Reagan finally said no, dovaria, no provaria, trust but verify, He believed that you had to verify. But very skilled in their negotiating techniques, whereas we were not. So if you have any follow-up questions, why, that's my general answer.
It's Greg Gross. My last government service was in the Pentagon, and I actually want to, those of you that have not had a chance to look at the book, it is outstanding. It's a very good read. It's a lot of narrative and good anecdote, but a lot of very thoughtful observations that I think apply to a lot of the things that we deal with, any of us who struggled to deal with the Pentagon and get it to change. And my question actually is about the experience you had in getting the Army to accept the helicopter in Vietnam. And I've heard a lot of stories from retired Marines about their taking credit for the use of the helicopter in combat in innovative ways. I'm curious about how much you look to them in what you did. But more broadly, you have throughout your career been someone who's been a kind of a change agent, someone who's dealt sometimes with very tough opposition, bureaucratic and otherwise. And I was wondering if you could make broader observations about what it takes to be that kind of successful change agent, innovator in dealing with those kinds of tough adversaries.
Yeah, well, it so happens that I wrote a PhD thesis on that subject, and I wanted to get a PhD. It took me some 20 years to get it, working at night and weekends, and finally in 1976 I got it. And I write my thesis on the 3 types of decision making in NATO. First, the easiest ones, decisions in a crisis, like defection of Malta. Second is more difficult, changes of policy. And the third, the most difficult of all, changes of organization. And I found that through my experience that those same 3 types of decision making applied to the Pentagon and applied to a lot of large organizations in the business world. It's true that the Marines did help me way back when I was in the 38th Infantry. They had helicopters, for large ones, for medevac, and we didn't. We had a few helicopters, and I was able to borrow and work with them, and I think I haven't really documented this, but I think that had the first use of armed helicopters behind enemy lines, using Marine helicopters. Now, on the other hand, the Marines, some of them take credit for dropping the air bridge into Chosin, and They were against some of the things I was doing for reasons I could never understand, but because that dropping the air bridge helped them. But the Marine Corps let's say that they were the only service that was not dead set against me. The Chief of Staff of the Air Force, CNO, Army, but the Chief of Staff of the Marine Corps, when President Carter said that SALT II was a modest but useful step, and I disagreed, he was the one chief who agreed with me, so he dared break with the others. So I think we have to give the Marines credit in that way. On the other hand, they did submit to their higher control, which was the Navy, and their policy was in general against Army helicopters. When I went to, took active my Army concept team to Vietnam with armed helicopters, I found myself dispossessed. After a week there, all my stuff was out on the street. And the Marine Corps commandant said that he didn't have orders from proper authority, meaning that I had orders from the Secretary of the Army and not Secretary of Defense. So he put me out on the street. So I had some Marine individuals who helped. But I'd say that of the services, and I have to say this with regret about the Army, because I was kind of ashamed that the Army did not get onto this idea, which I happen to think was a damn good idea in the way that the Army and all was to go. I think it has proved itself in the Gulf Wars, but it's little known that we had to resort to some nefarious ways sometime, what we call a cabal of four. I had three classmates, in class of 41, who had to be in key positions in the Department of Defense, and the three of us managed to run a few circles around the Department of the Army staff and go right to the Secretary of the Army and the Secretary of Defense. So that story, I think, is little known, but it's so difficult to get a new idea through an organization and to change in an organization, and particularly when roles and missions are involved. And to me, the roles and missions have been a big drag on the effectiveness of the of our soldiers, sailors, and airmen. I hope it's better. I hope it's a lot better now than it was in World War II and certainly in Korea and in Vietnam. But the roles and missions and the fighting for the dollar, which Heritage has tried to put into some sensible, and has put into some sensible straitjacket for years. We're still an awful lot of who lobbies for the dollar, who gets it, and roles and missions tend to, in my opinion, undermine the effectiveness of our defense establishment.
My name is Emily, and I work here at the Heritage Foundation. Thank you for your service, sir. I just commissioned as a second lieutenant in May, and I was wondering if you had any advice for someone just starting their military career.
Can you repeat the question for me? I can't remember.
She works here at Heritage. She was just commissioned as a second lieutenant, and she's asking if you have any advice for someone starting out in the Army as a second lieutenant.
Well, I've already given you some of my advice. Get yourself a good mentor. Get get to know Kim Holmes, and say,
Sorry.
I need somebody to help me out, and you follow what he's done, and you model yourself after examples, and then read. One of the things in my book is that Smokey Joe Wood and others, like MacArthur, were great students of military history, Patton, and you'll find an awful lot that you can use today by reading Thucydides. People think that that's dull and not interesting. The Peloponnesian War is fascinating reading. Get the 10 best books on the military history and read those. Get yourself a mentor and get yourself wedded to, steeped in duty, honor, country. And if the Army does not turn you on, if you're not getting up every day fascinated and want to do things, go out and make some money somewhere else. I mean, go to Walmart or someplace. But because the Army is a fascinating place, and you can make it so, but don't think it's going to be easy. I mean, I was silenced, and I thought my career was over at one time. I didn't know where I'd go when I retired from the Army, and after Carter's time. I was certainly struck back for 6 years for fighting for air mobility. Had I been hit earlier and didn't have a mentor, I never would have gotten to Major General rank. But it happened that my opposition came later on, and it didn't make much difference at that time. Once you're a general, you don't worry too much about whether or not you're going to be the general. So anyway, follow example, get enthusiastic, fascinated what you do, get innovative, stick your neck out, don't expect that you're going to win every time, take your risks, no loss, no gain. No risk, no gain, and then have a lot of fun at it.
Okay, we're coming to the end of time here. So what I'd like to do is, I saw some questions, some hands over here. To get all three of them in, could you just make it very quick? I'll collect all three of you, and then you can make some final remarks in response
All
to
right.
the questions and also anything else you want to say.
Okay.
So let's go all three of you. Bruce?
Yeah, Bruce Weinrod. I don't think anybody else is qualified to answer this particular question. For those of you who don't know, not only did Ed attend the Berlin Olympics in 1936, he came back and then ended up, after graduating from Johns Hopkins, going to West Point. So basically taking another 4 years over after that because of his concerns about what he had witnessed in Berlin. So my question is, you mentioned about America today. Do you see any parallels as one who, at 1936, in Britain, Winston Churchill was obviously, but most people either had their head in the sands or thought the U.S. should not get involved in European affairs. Do you see any parallels in terms of where American thinking is heading at this point in terms of its role internationally?
Okay, first question.
You want to answer that one first?
We're going to try to collect all
All
three
right,
of them
right.
so we can end up. So I'll try to remember the sequence of them.
Thank you, General. It's a great pleasure and honor to meet you here. My name is James. I'm a founder of the nonprofit organization China Press Freedom Foundation. My question is regarding the history. You witnessed so many historic moments, and so in the early 80s, that when you negotiate with the Soviet, did you ever had a feeling that the Soviet Union at that time as superpower would disappear just in 10 years' time? And the second is, remember that, did you ever had a feeling that the Soviet considered the China card that the U.S. play when you negotiate with the SALT treaty, because at that time we know that Henry Kissinger and Nixon just visited China, opened the China door, and they played the China card with the Soviet. And the other is with reality that how do you assess the current China policy? For example, it's really almost zero.
That's
record
three questions in one.
Right. Thank you very much.
That's going to be 9
Thank you.
questions. I tell you what, you can take either one of those, but the one I thought was interesting, you can see the Soviet Union coming to an end. Jeff, do you have any?
Jeff Kennedy with Council for America. My question was a broader one, maybe deal with it in your book, of the role of the helicopter warfare in Vietnam. As I was there, I was in the Army in 1970 and served with a unit with the 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment, so I was aware of the role that the helicopter played in our warfare there. But then I happened to go back to Vietnam while I was working for Heritage Foundation in 1975 in April at the time of the collapse. And one of the things I witnessed there was these hundreds and hundreds of helicopters parked in the air bases all over Vietnam. And I asked our Vietnamese escort officers, well, why aren't you using these in the warfare? And they said, well, 2 problems. We have to cannibalize them for parts because we don't have money to buy parts. And 2, the price of oil has gone up so much we have a hard time putting fuel in them. And it showed to me that we turned to warfare the way we were fighting it over to the Vietnamese, but then they weren't able to fight it after we left.
Okay. Want me to recap the questions, or do you remember them all?
Well, the first one I think was from Bruce Weinrod.
Well, Bruce, right. It's about parallels between now and the 30s. Is that? Yeah. Right.
And yeah, I think there is a parallel on the America Firsters kind of idea that we seem to be sliding down the idea that along the line that we don't need foreign affairs. We don't need international relations. It's all domestic. Now, a great deal of it is domestic, but we need to get interested, and we need to take a good, broad look at things. For example, if we decide that we need to spend more attention to China and the far east, it does not mean that we abandon Europe, which we have been doing for the last a couple of years. So I'm disappointed in the lack of interest in international relations in the press primarily. That's where you got to start. Of course, it really starts with the leadership of the country and at the top. So how you turn this around, I don't know. I was just talking to this morning to Fred Kemp, head of the Atlantic Council, about how little interest there is in the United States in the press and the leadership and the school system and international relations. On the second question, what he had 3 questions. What was the one that you want to hit first, Kim?
How about, did you, when you were negotiating with the Soviets, did you expect them to collapse?
Oh, yes. I would say that when our whole team, the whole Reagan team, was quite sure that the Soviet Union was going to collapse. We didn't know when, and we weren't sure that it would collapse as it was headed without an incident. So we had a very dicey time of it. I mean, look at the Bay of Pigs, boy, we came very close to getting into a nuclear war. And so it's, you have to, you can't just believe that the nation is going to collapse on its own without having to take into account that there are some crazies in the world. There happened to be one in North Korea, head of North Korea today, and some more that are just about as crazy in Iran. So you have to be careful of this. But when at the time that we were writing, helping Reagan write the speech, tear down this wall, we went around the circle and and decided, we all decided that the Soviet Union is going to collapse. When? Most of them said 2040, 250, 225. I was the lowest down. I said 2001. Why, the president said. I said, because I happen to be married to a woman who studied astronomy, and it's the great year of the second sidereal movement, which will occur in 2001. He didn't know what a sidereal movement was, but anyway, I happened to pick 2001 just because my wife has said that was the year of the sidereal. So I came closer than anybody else to picking the date of demise. What are the other questions? Is or some other? Kim?
Well, there was two questions there about
Yeah.
what do you think about our China policy, and then you were asking about
China card in negotiating with the Soviet, and what's the current assessment of the China policy?
The assessment of the China policy again?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, back in the 1980s, when you negotiated with the Soviet, U.S. just had a open China door open.
Right.
With that China card, how do you negotiate with the Soviet?
Well,
Thank you.
let's say that the Russians, the Soviets actually were more cautious, and they helped us more than you might imagine by restraining China. China was asked by North Koreans to come into North Korea way before 1950, and the Soviets kept a lid on them, just as the Soviets kept a lid on Castro. So while they were in favor of getting a world hegemony one of these days, they were also, particularly on the military side, realistic about what might happen in a time of war. So the Soviets were better, and I might say that they influenced China until finally, and it happened to be a coincidence with what's his name? Not Atwood, but our Atchison's speech, saying that the Korea is beyond our sphere of influence. And then the North Koreans convinced the Chinese and the Russians took the lid off of it and let them go in. So Russia then was dominating a lot of the Chinese. They're not doing that anymore. So I feel the loss of a more of a restraining hand on China. For the time being, I feel that China is more interested in its gaining economic hegemony than military. But on the other hand, they are spending money on their nuclear programs, going to put a man on the moon, and they are moving forward. So I think we need to be paying a lot more attention to the military side and the international relations side of China, and not simply, as I think we are, concentrating on the economic side. I think it's correct that we do pay more attention to the Far East, but as I mentioned, it should not be at the expense of forgetting about the rest of the world and pulling out almost completely from Europe, abandoning Poland after Poland sent troops down to Iraq and Afghanistan, and turning our back on the Germans and others in Europe. And you hear almost nothing about Africa in these days, where an awful lot of genocide is going on, and an awful lot of things that should not be going on in the world are going on. So just how you turn around this whole idea of getting people more cognizant that we are a part of the world and that we're destined and lucky that we can be the world leaders, and we should use that sensibly. And except for giving money to the Heritage Foundation and helping them along, and joining the Atlantic Council, and fighting the Brookings Institution, things like that. Why I'm not quite sure where we go.
Well, I'm sure that all of you have some more questions, and Jeff, we didn't quite get to yours, but perhaps if you have more questions for him, you can come up and ask them in person. I've been given the high sign, so I have to bring it to an end. But General Rowny, thank you very much for coming here today. Thank you for your service. Thank you for the many years of friendship to me and to Bruce and to Jeff and all of us at Heritage over the years. We hope that you will start writing on another book soon, so we can have you back perhaps next year and we can continue this. But in the meantime, let's all join me in thanking General Rowny.